The sun had barely crested the horizon, painting the sky over Washington, D.C., in a muted gold that reflected off the city's monumental structures. Samantha Ellis sat stiffly in the back of the black armored SUV, her hands clasped tightly around a manila folder so heavy with secrets it seemed to pulse like a living thing. Every mile closer to the White House, her pulse accelerated, her mind replaying the events that had led her here. 3 days ago, Samantha had stumbled upon something she wasn't supposed to see. A trail of unauthorized communications, buried deep in encrypted files, communications pointing to a high-level threat within the government itself. Most analysts would have hesitated, fearing the implications. But Samantha had a reputation for precision, for seeing patterns others overlooked. Now, her discovery had propelled her from a quiet, unnoticed analyst into the epicenter of a storm she couldn't yet understand. The SUV rolled through the gates of the White House with a quiet thrum of authority. Security personnel glanced her way with professional curiosity, their eyes sharp behind mirrored sunglasses. She could feel their scrutiny, the unspoken judgment of someone out of place in these halls of power. Samantha's tailored blazer felt suddenly restrictive, her polished heels clacking against the armored vehicle's floor as though reminding her of every step she had ever taken in pursuit of her career. When the vehicle stopped, she stepped out, inhaling a deep breath of crisp morning air. The marble floors beneath her heels gleamed like mirrors, reflecting the grandeur of history. Portraits of past presidents stared down from ornate frames, silent witnesses to centuries of decisions that had shaped the nation. Samantha swallowed, the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. She carried information that could change everything, but she was about to be told to wait outside. A young security officer, barely older than her, stepped forward, his earpiece buzzing faintly. "Ms. Ellis," he said, his voice polite but firm, "please wait outside the briefing room. Only authorized personnel may enter." The words hit her harder than she expected. Wait outside. She had uncovered a threat. She had traced it meticulously. And yet here she was, relegated to a hallway while the most powerful decision-makers in the country debated her findings without her input. Her throat tightened and she forced a nod, suppressing the urge to argue. She couldn't afford to make waves, not yet. The hallway beyond was empty, quiet except for the soft hum of the ventilation system. Samantha's heels clicked against the marble, a steady, anxious rhythm that mirrored the racing of her heart. She leaned against the wall, trying to steady herself. She wasn't usually prone to fear. In her previous work, she had spent late nights in windowless rooms decoding encrypted files, uncovering threats that no one else could see. But this was different. This was the center of power itself, a place where every mistake could have consequences beyond her comprehension. Her mind wandered, imagining the scene in the briefing room. Men and women in tailored suits, standing over digital maps, discussing classified operations she had painstakingly traced. Did they know the full scope of the threat? Did they even know she existed? Samantha swallowed hard and glanced down the corridor. The sun streamed in through the tall windows, glinting off brass door handles and polished floors. Outside, the city moved obliviously, unaware of the storm gathering within these walls. A sudden whisper of movement caught her attention. One of the aides had paused mid-step, phone pressed to his ear, urgency flashing across his face. Their eyes met for just a second, a fleeting acknowledgement that she was more than just an outsider. And then the radio crackled, and a voice pierced the tense silence of the hallway. "Request for Samantha Ellis immediately. Secure clearance granted." Her breath caught. The words repeated, sharper this time. Someone very high up had requested her presence. Samantha's stomach flipped. This wasn't just a procedural summons, this was personal. Her pulse raced. Could it really be the president? The young security officer returned, his earlier politeness replaced with a visible tension. "Follow me," he said, more briskly than before. Samantha moved, her heels echoing against the marble. Every instinct told her that the next few moments would change her life forever. They passed a series of imposing doors, each more impressive than the last. Samantha tried to memorize the details, the patterns in the carpet, the engravings in the woodwork, because she had an overwhelming sense that she might never get another chance to see these halls again. Her fingers clenched around the folder as though it were a lifeline, its contents a bridge between the unseen threat and the people who could stop it. The officer stopped outside a door she didn't recognize. "This is as far as I can take you," he said. His eyes flicked down the corridor, and for a moment Samantha thought he might leave her here outside once again. But then, without another word, the door cracked open from the inside. A voice, calm yet authoritative, called, "Ms. Ellis, please enter." Her legs trembled as she stepped forward, crossing the threshold. The room inside was modest, but the energy was palpable. A single chair waited in the center, facing a massive desk, and for a moment Samantha wondered if the world had slowed to a crawl just for her. She placed the folder carefully on the chair, her hand still trembling. "Ms. Ellis," the voice said again, this time closer, warmer, yet carrying an intensity that made her shiver. She looked up, and there he was. Not the aides, not the generals, but the president himself, standing in the doorway, eyes locking with hers. "You've uncovered something important," he said. No introductions, no small talk, just a statement heavy with gravity. Samantha nodded, barely able to speak. Every fiber of her being recognized the enormity of this moment. She had always dreamed of making a difference, but never like this, never in a room with the most powerful person in the nation, holding secrets that could shake the foundations of government. "Please," he continued, gesturing to the chair, "we need to discuss this in detail." As she moved forward, heart hammering in her chest, Samantha realized she had crossed a threshold she could never uncross. Outside, the world carried on as if nothing had changed. Inside, the fate of the country, the integrity of her career, and her very survival hinged on what she would do next. And as the door clicked shut behind her, a single thought burned in her mind. She had no idea who she could trust. Samantha Ellis stepped out of the room, the echo of the president's calm, commanding voice still ringing in her ears. She was led into a long, narrow hallway lined with portraits of past leaders, men and women who had faced crises far beyond what she could imagine. She tried to steady her racing heart, but each step felt heavier than the last. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, reflecting harshly off the polished marble floors. She could see security personnel moving with precise choreography, radios buzzing faintly with coded chatter she couldn't decipher. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, a corridor of uncertainty that mirrored the storm in her mind. "You'll have to wait here," the young officer said again, almost apologetically. "I'm not authorized to take you further." Samantha nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Waiting. That word felt like a punishment. She had uncovered a threat so critical it could destabilize entire operations, yet here she was, sidelined in silence. She clutched the folder to her chest, the leather edges digging into her palms. She found a quiet corner and leaned against the wall, trying to control her breathing. Her thoughts raced, circling endlessly. Did they know the full extent? Could they even understand what I had found? Or was I just a pawn in someone else's game? The minutes passed. Slowly, tortuously. She tried to focus, tracing the patterns she had uncovered in her mind, but the emptiness of the hallway made the images blur. The polished floors, the distant hum of ventilation, the muffled footsteps of aides, it all became a backdrop to a gnawing sense of helplessness. She glanced at her phone. No messages, no emails, not even a whisper from the outside world. It was as if she had been suspended in a bubble where time didn't exist. Her mind replayed every scenario she had anticipated, every precaution she had taken, every warning she had received about the dangers of stepping too far out of line. And yet, now that she was here in the belly of power, none of that mattered. She was powerless. A door creaked somewhere behind her. Samantha froze, straining to hear. The sound was faint, almost imperceptible, yet it jolted her senses. A figure emerged, a uniformed aide, hurriedly whispering into a phone. Their eyes met, and in that brief moment, Samantha caught the urgency etched in every line of their face. A bead of sweat trickled down her temple, and she realized with a shiver that the room she had left might be only a prelude to something far larger. Then came the voice over the radio. Immediate clearance for Samantha Ellis. Proceed to secure briefing. Samantha's heart lurched. Immediate clearance. Someone high up had bypassed protocol. Her pulse raced. She had prepared for exposure, for confrontation, for danger, but this level of urgency was unprecedented. She felt a thrill of fear and exhilaration mix in her chest. She wasn't just an observer anymore. She was about to step into the center of something massive, and she couldn't yet comprehend the scope. The officer returned, visibly more tense than before. "Follow me," he said. Samantha obeyed, heels clicking sharply against the marble. The hallway twisted, and with each turn her anticipation grew. The sunlight streamed through tall windows, throwing elongated shadows that seemed to move with her. Her thoughts turned inward. I have the evidence, I have the proof. But do they know how deep it goes? Do they understand what I've uncovered? The questions churned like a storm in her mind. Every instinct screamed caution, yet another voice, quieter, sharper, urged her forward. This was her moment. The officer stopped outside a heavily reinforced door. "This is as far as I can take you," he said. His eyes darted down the corridor, lingering briefly on something unseen. "Inside, they'll explain everything." Samantha's hand shook as she reached for the handle. She inhaled deeply. Every part of her body was on high alert, muscles coiled, senses sharpened. She stepped through the threshold, and the room inside was smaller than she expected, dimly lit, almost austere. A single chair sat in the center, facing a massive, imposing desk. A voice broke the silence, calm, authoritative, yet carrying a weight that made her knees weak. "Ms. Ellis." Her gaze snapped to the source. There he was, not an aide, not a general, but the president himself, standing in the doorway. His eyes met hers, steady and unwavering, measuring her, weighing her. "You've been brought here for a reason," he continued, voice low but commanding. "We need to understand the full scope of what you've discovered." Samantha swallowed, words caught in her throat. She had imagined this moment countless times in her mind, the confrontation, the recognition, the acknowledgement of her work. Yet nothing had prepared her for the intensity of it. She nodded, barely able to breathe. "Please," he said, gesturing toward the chair, "sit." She did, placing the folder carefully on her lap. The leather edges dug into her palms, grounding her, reminding her that what she carried wasn't just paper. It was a key to something far larger than herself. The president stepped closer, scanning the folder without touching it. His eyes flicked to her, sharp and penetrating. "This information, it's unprecedented. Are you confident in its accuracy?" Samantha took a deep breath. "Yes, sir. Every step traced, every source verified. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't certain." The room was silent for a heartbeat, the kind of silence that presses on the chest and makes the air itself feel thick. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "Good, because what comes next will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine." Her stomach flipped. Test her. She had uncovered threats before, navigated bureaucratic mazes, and faced hostile agencies. But this felt different. The air in the room seemed charged, heavy with the unspoken knowledge that her next steps could determine not just her fate, but the fate of the nation itself. The door opened behind her, a security aide peering in briefly before stepping back. Samantha's pulse quickened. The president's gaze never left her, steady and unwavering. "We're counting on you," he said. As she rose to follow him into the next room, adrenaline surged through her veins. Every step echoed against the polished floors, each click of her heels a drumbeat announcing the gravity of what lay ahead. The hallway outside was no longer a corridor. It was a gauntlet, a passage between the ordinary world she knew and the extraordinary responsibility she had been thrust into. Her mind raced. Can I do this? Am I ready? Who can I trust? The questions tumbled through her head, each one heavier than the last, and yet beneath the fear a spark of determination flared. She had trained for this. She had prepared for the impossible, and now the impossible had arrived. As the president gestured toward a secure room at the end of the hallway, Samantha's hand tightened around the folder. The world outside might have gone on as usual, tourists taking photos, cars honking in distant streets, the city oblivious to the quiet storm unfolding within these walls. But inside, everything had changed. A final glance back down the corridor confirmed it. No one could predict what would happen next, and that uncertainty, that precarious balance between danger and duty, was where she would have to operate. The door opened, and the president's voice cut through the silence one last time. "Ms. Ellis, welcome to the center of it all." And with that, the hallway behind her seemed to vanish, replaced by a weighty, almost tangible tension. Every instinct screamed that the moment of truth had arrived, and that waiting, no matter how long, was over. Samantha Ellis stepped into the secure briefing room, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor, a steady drumbeat that echoed her nervous heartbeat. The room was small, dimly lit, but every inch seemed charged with purpose. A large digital map covered one wall, flickering with live intelligence feeds, satellite imagery, and streams of encrypted data scrolling too fast to follow. Monitors lined the opposite wall, each displaying information that felt as though it were alive, pulsing with urgency. She placed the manila folder carefully on the table in front of her, the leather edges pressing into her palms. Every movement felt amplified, as if the room itself were observing her, measuring her every breath. The folder contained everything she had uncovered: unauthorized communications, covert operations gone awry, and evidence of a potential internal threat to national security. The information was explosive, the kind that could destabilize governments, ruin careers, and endanger lives. And now she was expected to present it to the one person whose judgment could alter the course of the country: the President of the United States. The room fell silent. The president stepped in, his presence commanding without being theatrical. His gaze was steady, penetrating, the kind that made her feel simultaneously seen and scrutinized. She straightened in her chair, reminding herself that she had prepared for this. Every chart, every code, every anomaly had been verified. She was certain of her findings. "Ms. Ellis," he began, his voice calm but heavy with authority, "we've been briefed on your work. We understand you've uncovered something significant. I need you to walk me through it, step by step." Samantha took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the folder. She opened it carefully, revealing layers of documents, annotated reports, and encrypted logs. She began to speak, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. 3 weeks ago, I noticed irregular communication patterns in our intelligence network. At first, I assumed it was routine, but further investigation revealed that these were not standard protocols. Unauthorized transmissions were occurring between secure nodes, bypassing all conventional checks. She pointed to the digital map, which mirrored some of the activity she described. These transmissions originated internally. Someone with clearance, someone high-level, is funneling information outside authorized channels. The content suggests operational interference, possibly compromising missions critical to national security. The president's expression remained unreadable, but a subtle tightening of his jaw hinted at the gravity of the revelation. Samantha continued, her hands steady despite the tension in the room. "I traced the signals to several individuals with direct access to operational intelligence. These are trusted personnel, people whose credibility is unquestioned by most, yet the data leaves no doubt. Protocols were bypassed intentionally." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Silence hung over the room like a storm cloud. Even the monitors seemed to quiet, the hum of the equipment fading against the gravity of the revelation. Samantha felt her pulse in her throat, her heartbeat loud enough that she feared it would betray her composure. "Do you have a source for this?" the president asked, his tone deliberate. Every word carried weight, a subtle reminder that this was no ordinary briefing. Samantha nodded. "Yes, sir. Every transmission has been verified through multiple channels. I cross-referenced logs, IP trails, and encryption fingerprints. There's no error. This is real. The president leaned back, absorbing the information. His eyes never left hers, but she could sense the wheels turning behind them, evaluating not just the data but the messenger herself. This is unprecedented, he said quietly. If what you're saying is accurate, the implications are far-reaching. Do you realize what this could mean for operational security, for the integrity of the department? Samantha swallowed, her throat dry. Yes, sir, I understand the risk. That's why I brought the folder. I've traced everything I could and I've documented every anomaly. But the breach is ongoing, and unless immediate action is taken, the threat will escalate. He nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. And you believe this breach comes from someone internal? Yes, sir. All evidence points inward. External threats are accounted for. This is deliberate, sophisticated, and highly coordinated within our own ranks. The president's fingers tapped lightly on the desk, a measured rhythm that mirrored the tension in Samantha's chest. Ms. Ellis, this is serious, more serious than you can imagine. People have tried to cover breaches before, and many have failed. How can I be certain that your data is accurate, that it hasn't been manipulated to mislead us? Samantha's lips pressed into a thin line. Sir, I understand the skepticism. That's why I've verified every piece of data independently. I've cross-checked logs, traced encryption keys, and conducted pattern analysis on the communication streams. I wouldn't present this if I had any doubt. The evidence is irrefutable. The room was silent again, charged with the kind of tension that makes seconds feel like minutes. Samantha could hear her own heartbeat, rhythmic and insistent, a reminder that the stakes were real, immediate, and dangerous. She glanced at the digital map, at the flashing indicators of compromised nodes, and felt a shiver run down her spine. She had brought the invisible danger into the light, but now she had to survive it in front of the most powerful man in the world. The president's voice cut through the stillness. If what you say is true, we are facing not just a breach, but a potential sabotage of critical operations. Lives are at stake. Missions that rely on this data could be compromised. How long before the perpetrators realize we know? Samantha's fingers clenched around the folder. If we act now, we have a chance to contain it. But delay even a few hours, sir, the consequences could be catastrophic. He nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. We'll need to move swiftly and quietly. If this information leaks, or if the wrong people become aware that you've uncovered it, it could jeopardize not just operations but national security itself. The weight of his words pressed down on Samantha, a tangible force that made her knees ache even as she remained seated. She had expected pressure, yes, but this, the combination of responsibility, scrutiny, and imminent danger was overwhelming. Yet beneath the fear, determination flared. She had trained for this. She had prepared for the impossible. And now the impossible had arrived. The door to the briefing room opened quietly, and a security aide stepped in, whispering something to the president. He nodded, then turned back to Samantha, his expression unreadable. We'll need to bring in a small, trusted team, only those cleared at the highest level, and you will lead the initial containment efforts. Do you understand? Yes, sir, she replied, voice steady despite the adrenaline in her veins. The president leaned forward, resting his hands on the edge of the table. One more thing, he said, his tone dropping to a whisper almost conspiratorial. Not everyone in this room is loyal. Not everyone outside this room can be trusted. You may be alone in this. And if anyone moves against you, his eyes locked onto hers, intensity blazing, you'll have to act decisively. No hesitation. Samantha's stomach flipped. The room felt smaller, the monitors blinking like distant stars in a sky she couldn't navigate alone. She realized with a chill that the threats she had uncovered were nothing compared to the dangers she would face in executing the response. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, an anonymous message flashing on the screen. They're already watching. Move carefully. Her pulse thundered. Someone was monitoring her. Someone knew she was here. And the president, calm and commanding as he was, couldn't shield her from everything. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of equipment and the faint ticking of an unseen clock. Samantha realized that at this moment, she was no longer just an analyst presenting data. She was a linchpin in a game she barely understood, a player whose every move could determine the outcome of events far beyond her control. And then the president said words that made her blood run cold. "Prepare yourself. What happens next will test everything you've learned, and it will test you personally." Samantha's fingers clenched around the folder. She felt the weight of the nation pressing down on her shoulders, the gravity of truth and consequence colliding in a way that left her breathless. She had stepped into the epicenter of power, and now the real challenge was about to begin. Outside, the world continued as if nothing had changed. Tourists snapped photos of the White House, cars honked in distant streets, and life carried on oblivious to the storm brewing inside. Inside, however, time had slowed, each second heavy with tension, each breath a reminder that what she had uncovered could change everything, if she survived the confrontation. The door closed softly behind the president as he turned back to the monitors. Samantha sat still, heart hammering, mind racing. One thing was certain, the waiting was over, the game had begun. And as she glanced back at the flashing data streams, she knew she had only begun to uncover the depth of the threat and the danger that awaited her in the next steps. The room felt smaller now, almost claustrophobic, as Samantha Ellis laid out the evidence she had spent weeks compiling. The fluorescent lights above cast a stark glare on the polished table, illuminating folders, encrypted hard drives, and annotated printouts that spelled out the breach in terrifying clarity. Every line of text, every trace of irregular communication she had meticulously traced, now hung in the air between her and the president like a ticking bomb. He watched her with a quiet intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. "Go ahead," he said. "Walk me through it. Don't leave anything out." Samantha drew in a shaky breath, steadying herself. "Sir, the breach is internal. The unauthorized transmissions originate from multiple high-level personnel with access to operational intelligence. These transmissions bypass standard security protocols, meaning someone within the system is deliberately compromising sensitive information." She lifted the first folder, flipping it open. "I've documented the timelines, traced the encryption keys, and identified patterns in the data that indicate coordination. Whoever is behind this knows exactly what they're doing. It's not sloppy, it's calculated, and it's ongoing." The president leaned in, resting his forearms on the desk. His expression betrayed no panic, but the furrow in his brow spoke volumes. "Internal," he murmured, "not external hackers." "No, sir," Samantha replied firmly. "This is deliberate, targeted, and internal. Every anomaly points to personnel who have full clearance. They're exploiting our systems from within. I've cross-referenced activity logs, communication timestamps, and access points. There's no doubt someone is manipulating the system to serve their own agenda." The president's hand tapped rhythmically against the desk, the soft thud amplifying the tension. "And you're certain?" he asked, his voice low but unwavering. "This is not a false lead." "Yes, sir," Samantha said, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I verified every detail independently. I traced the source of every transmission. The evidence is irrefutable. If we don't act immediately, the consequences could be catastrophic. Ongoing operations could be compromised, intelligence lost, lives endangered." The room fell silent. Outside, the city hummed along its usual rhythm, oblivious to the storm brewing within the walls of the White House. Inside, every breath seemed amplified, every heartbeat audible. Samantha could feel the weight of the folder pressing into her hands, a physical manifestation of the responsibility now resting on her shoulders. The president rose from his chair and began packing slowly, his gaze fixed on the wall of monitors displaying live feeds from intelligence nodes. "You've uncovered a web," he said finally, his voice carrying a quiet authority. "A coordinated effort from within, and yet no one else has seen it. No one else would dare admit it." He paused, his eyes narrowing as they returned to hers. "You've done what no one else could. You've illuminated a shadow within our own system." Samantha felt a mix of pride and fear. She had spent countless nights analyzing data, tracing signals, cross-referencing personnel, and now it all culminated in this moment, standing in front of the president, exposing a network of deception that could shake the highest levels of power. "Sir," she said cautiously, "I've traced the activity to specific nodes that match personnel access. If we move quickly, we can contain the breach and prevent further compromise. But delay even for a few hours." She let the words hang, heavy with implication. The president's hand hovered over a monitor displaying a list of names, each accompanied by activity logs and access timestamps. "And these names," he said, pointing to the first, "you're confident these are involved?" "Yes, sir. Each has been verified," Samantha replied, her voice gaining strength. "The patterns, the access anomalies, the timestamps, they all align. This isn't circumstantial. The risk is imminent." He paused, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You understand what this means, don't you?" His gaze fixed her in place, unyielding. "We are talking about people who have the power to undermine operations, compromise missions, even endanger lives. And some of them may be untouchable by conventional means." Samantha nodded, feeling a chill creep down her spine. She had known the stakes were high, but hearing it articulated by the president, the calm, measured man whose every word carried the weight of authority, made it painfully real. She realized that the breach wasn't just a technical issue. It was a threat to the very foundation of trust and loyalty within the government itself. "Sir," she continued, "I've mapped the communications. The network is highly compartmentalized. Whoever is orchestrating this is careful, but patterns emerge. With your authorization, I can initiate containment protocols immediately. We can isolate affected nodes, track transmissions in real time, and secure operational data before further damage is done." The president walked to the map, tracing lines of activity with a gloved finger. "This is bigger than I imagined," he muttered. "Bigger than any of us imagined. And yet, here you are, a single analyst bringing clarity to a crisis that could spiral out of control in hours. Tell me, Ms. Ellis, do you understand what you've just unleashed?" "Yes, sir," she said quietly. "I understand the gravity, I understand the danger, and I'm ready to act." He stopped packing, turning to face her fully. "Acting," he said slowly, "is not just about strategy or intelligence. It's about decisiveness, courage, and trust. Trust in yourself and in those who are still loyal." His eyes narrowed. "Do you trust anyone else in this building?" Samantha's stomach twisted. She had allies, colleagues she respected, but she knew better than to assume loyalty in a world where ambition and secrecy intertwined. "Sir, not completely," she admitted. "There are a few I can rely on, but caution is necessary. The threat isn't just external, it's inside these walls." The president nodded, as if confirming a suspicion that had long haunted him. "Good," he said, voice sharp but calm. "Because you will be working alone initially. You're the only one I trust to lead the containment and response efforts. One misstep and everything we're trying to protect could be lost. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Samantha replied firmly, though her hands trembled slightly. He leaned forward, resting both hands on the table. "Ms. Ellis, you've done something remarkable. You've uncovered a shadow that has eluded us all. But shadows are dangerous because they hide in plain sight. Be careful who you trust. Be precise. And above all, be ready for what comes next. It won't just be a test of skill, it will be a test of character, judgment, and courage." A sudden alert flashed on one of the monitors. Samantha's heart skipped a beat as the screen displayed a security breach notification, a minor anomaly at first glance, but enough to trigger alarms. She realized immediately. The perpetrators were aware that their network had been uncovered. They were moving, preparing, reacting. Her pulse surged. She glanced at the president, whose calm demeanor masked an intensity that made her realize just how precarious their position was. "Sir," she said, her voice tense, "they know. They're already responding." The president's eyes hardened. "Then we have no time to waste." He straightened, his presence suddenly commanding the entire room. "Initiate containment protocols immediately. Ms. Ellis, you will lead. Every move you make will be decisive, and if necessary, you will act alone." Samantha's stomach flipped. The folder she had brought suddenly felt lighter, yet the responsibility it represented pressed down on her like a physical weight. Outside, the world remained unaware of the silent crisis unfolding within these walls. Inside, the situation was volatile, every second a potential disaster. She looked at the monitors, at the cascading streams of data, and realized with a chilling clarity. The breach was only the beginning. The real danger was what would happen once the perpetrators realized their cover had been blown, and how far they would go to protect themselves. The president's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts, calm but resolute. "Prepare yourself. This is bigger than any operation you've handled before. And remember, not everyone is what they seem." Samantha nodded, the weight of truth settling on her shoulders. She had uncovered a shadow within the government. She had revealed it to the most powerful person in the nation. And now, the storm was about to break. Her fingers tightened on the folder as she realized the gravity of her situation. She was no longer a mere analyst. She was the nation's first line of defense against a threat hidden in plain sight. And the next move, every move, would be hers alone to make. The moment Samantha Ellis finished presenting her evidence, the room seemed to tighten around her. The polished walls of the briefing room no longer felt safe. They were closing in like a cage. Every monitor flickered with data that screamed urgency. Every red indicator a silent reminder that the threat she had uncovered wasn't theoretical. It was alive, moving, and now aware that it had been discovered. The president's gaze cut across the room, sharp and deliberate. "Ms. Ellis," he said, his tone even but heavy with warning, "you need to understand something. This isn't just a breach. This is personal. People will attempt to stop you. People will lie, manipulate, even go as far as to kill to bury the truth." Samantha felt her stomach twist. She had always anticipated pressure from her superiors, bureaucratic roadblocks, and skepticism. But murder, that was a weight she hadn't imagined when she traced those irregular communications. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. The folder in front of her suddenly felt like a shield, and yet she knew it wasn't enough to protect her from the unseen forces gathering in the shadows. The president leaned back, his gaze unflinching. "You've been cleared to act, but discretion is everything. A single misstep, and the consequences won't just be political, they'll be catastrophic. You could become a target before anyone else even knows what you've uncovered." Samantha's fingers clenched into fists. "Sir, I understand," she said, her voice steady despite the cold sweat running down her back. "But what should I do first? How do we contain this before it escalates?" "Containment is just the beginning," the president said, his eyes narrowing. "We'll have to isolate compromised systems, trace every transmission, and neutralize threats without alarming the rest of the network. And someone you might never see coming is already watching. Every move, every decision will be observed." A chill ran down Samantha's spine. She had expected tension, yes, but being under surveillance in real time while orchestrating the first steps of a containment operation was another level entirely. "Sir, how do I know who I can trust?" she asked quietly. The president's expression didn't waver. "Trust is earned, not given, and right now you're earning it through action. There are only a few people in this building who are loyal. Rely on your instincts. Follow the evidence. And if someone tries to mislead you, act decisively. Hesitation could be fatal." Samantha exhaled slowly. Her training in intelligence analysis had prepared her for high-pressure operations, but nothing had prepared her for this, navigating a labyrinth of deceit in the very heart of power. Every step could expose her. Every choice carried life-or-death stakes. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it and her blood ran cold. Another anonymous message. "They know you've been summoned. Move carefully. They will try to stop you." She realized in that instant that the threat was no longer abstract. Whoever had been manipulating communications within the government now knew she had been summoned, that she had been entrusted with stopping them. And if the perpetrators were clever, and Samantha knew they were, this was just the beginning of a dangerous game. The president's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. "We'll need to act quickly. The longer this persists, the more control the perpetrators retain. Missions could fail. Lives could be lost. And once they realize their network has been penetrated, they will move to eliminate any obstacles, including you." Samantha swallowed hard, trying to steady her racing heartbeat. She had known the stakes were high, but hearing them articulated so starkly brought them into sharp focus. Every instinct screamed caution, yet another, quieter voice urged her forward. This was her moment to act, and hesitation could cost everything. "Sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "what are my immediate priorities?" The president moved toward one of the monitors, pointing at a cluster of red indicators that represented compromised nodes within the intelligence network. "Containment," he said simply. "Isolate compromised systems, trace communications in real time, secure operational data. Do it quietly. If the perpetrators suspect they're exposed, they'll escalate their actions immediately." Samantha nodded, feeling the gravity of his words sink in. Her training in intelligence operations had prepared her for high-stress situations, but this was unprecedented. She wasn't just analyzing data anymore. She was operating in real time, leading a containment mission that could determine the survival of sensitive national operations. "Sir," she said, her voice trembling slightly despite her resolve, "if they've already noticed me, how do I protect myself while I act?" The president's eyes hardened. "Awareness and discretion. Assume you are being watched at every moment. Move cautiously. Use encrypted channels. Trust no one completely. And remember, if anyone moves against you directly, act decisively. There will be no second chances." Samantha's mind raced. She had always believed in following procedure, in relying on established chains of command. But now, procedure was a luxury she couldn't afford. Every decision would carry immediate consequences. Every misstep could expose her to the very people she was trying to stop. She glanced at the monitors again, noting the live feeds of system activity. Small anomalies flickered across the screens, indicators that the perpetrators were moving, reacting. It was as if she had lit a fire within a hidden world, and now she had to navigate the flames without being burned. "Time is critical," the president said, his voice calm but insistent. "You have one shot at containment before they realize their cover has been blown. Delay is death, literally. And don't forget, some of them are untouchable by conventional means. You may have to operate outside the rules you've always followed." Samantha felt a shiver run down her spine. She had always believed in following protocol, in staying within established boundaries. But now she understood that survival, and the survival of national security, might require bending or breaking the rules entirely. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, urgent and chilling. "They're closer than you think. Watch your back. Every move is being tracked." She felt her stomach knot. Whoever had sent this message had precise knowledge of her location, her movements, and possibly her next actions. It was confirmation of everything the president had warned her about. The threat was immediate, intelligent, and dangerous. The president moved closer, resting a hand on the edge of the desk. His eyes were piercing, calm yet commanding. "Ms. Ellis, you've uncovered a shadow in plain sight. The threat is real. The danger is imminent. and you are the only person who can act decisively. Are you ready to take this responsibility?" Samantha took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the folder. She realized that the weight she had carried since discovering the breach had only grown heavier, but beneath the fear, determination flared. She had trained for moments like this. She had prepared for the impossible, and now the impossible had arrived. "Yes, sir," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I'm ready." The president nodded, eyes narrowing with quiet intensity. "Good, because once you move, there will be no turning back. They will notice, they will react, and every decision you make will have consequences beyond what you can imagine. Trust your instincts, trust the evidence, and above all, trust yourself." Samantha felt the weight of responsibility settle fully on her shoulders. She wasn't just an analyst anymore. She was a linchpin in a dangerous game of power, intelligence, and survival. Outside, the world moved as if nothing had changed. Inside, every second carried life or death stakes. Every decision rippled through invisible channels of influence and danger. The president gestured toward the monitors. "Your first move," he said, voice low and deliberate, "will determine the outcome. Choose wisely." Samantha swallowed hard. She glanced at the flashing indicators, the encrypted streams, and the folder in her hands. The path ahead was fraught with peril, and she knew that the slightest misstep could be fatal. But one thing was certain: the waiting was over. The threat was real, and it was moving faster than she had anticipated. With a final glance at the president, Samantha rose, the gravity of her mission pressing down on her like a living force. Every nerve in her body screamed alert, every instinct sharpened by fear and determination. The next steps would be decisive, and the consequences of failure were unimaginable. As she moved toward the command console, her mind raced. "They know I'm here. They're watching, and they will try to stop me." But beneath the fear, she felt something else, a burning clarity. She had uncovered the threat. She had revealed it to the most powerful person in the nation, and now she would act. The storm was about to break. Samantha Ellis stood in front of the command console, the monitors flickering with a dizzying array of data streams, encrypted signals, and live operational feeds. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, each second stretching like an eternity. The folder in her hands had become a symbol of responsibility, a tangible weight representing everything at stake: national security, operational lives, and her own survival. The briefing room, once suffused with tense deliberation, had quieted into an almost suffocating stillness. The president had left, leaving Samantha with the responsibility of initiating containment protocols herself. His words echoed in her mind. "Every decision you make will have consequences beyond what you can imagine." And she knew he wasn't exaggerating. Her first task was clear: isolate the compromised nodes and secure sensitive operational data. But the challenge was monumental. The network was vast, segmented, and highly compartmentalized. Every action could trigger alerts. One false move and the perpetrators would know she was on to them. Worse, they might retaliate in ways she couldn't predict. Samantha took a deep breath, grounding herself. She had always thrived under pressure, but this was beyond anything she had ever faced. The responsibility wasn't just technical, it was moral, personal, and profoundly dangerous. She had no margin for error. She began typing, launching encrypted protocols, cross-referencing access logs, and isolating suspicious transmissions. Lines of code scrolled faster than her eyes could follow, and she felt the familiar thrill of analysis mingling with the raw adrenaline of danger. Every command carried weight. Every entry could determine whether a mission succeeded or failed, whether lives would be saved or lost. Suddenly, a notification flashed on the screen: an unauthorized access attempt. Samantha's heart lurched. She recognized the signature instantly. It was one of the high-level personnel she had traced earlier. Someone inside the building was actively probing for the source of the containment measures she had initiated. She froze for a moment, calculating. Every instinct screamed caution. She could alert security, but that would risk exposing her own presence and escalate the threat immediately. She had to act decisively, alone, with precision. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, tracing the intruder's digital footprint, cutting off access to sensitive nodes, and initiating countermeasures designed to lock the system down. The red indicators on the monitors blinked urgently, signaling her success, but she knew the battle had only just begun. Then her phone buzzed, another anonymous message: "They're aware, move now or you'll be trapped." Samantha's pulse thundered in her chest. The breach wasn't just detected, it was being actively countered. The perpetrators were not passive. They were intelligent, ruthless, and now fully alert. Her mind raced. She had to decide: continue the containment and risk confrontation, or pull back temporarily and risk giving the intruders time to adapt. Either choice carried lethal consequences. She glanced at the folder in her hands, at the meticulously documented evidence of the breach. Every piece of data, every anomaly she had traced, pointed to one undeniable truth. She couldn't hesitate. Delay meant disaster. Samantha made her choice. She would act. With rapid precision, she activated a secondary protocol, designed to not only isolate compromised nodes, but also trace the intruder's location within the network. She had calculated that this would alert the perpetrators that someone was onto them, but it was a calculated risk. Knowledge, she realized, was power, and she needed every advantage she could get. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she forced herself to remain calm. Every line of code, every command entered, felt like a step on a tightrope stretched over a pit of unseen dangers. One miscalculation, one delayed keystroke, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Suddenly, the monitors shifted. Data she had not anticipated appeared. Internal communication channels rerouted, transmissions being masked, evidence being erased as she watched. The intruders were fighting back, sophisticated and relentless. Samantha's stomach churned. She realized with a cold clarity that she was dealing with experts, people who understood the network as well as she did, if not better. Every move had to be faster, smarter, more decisive. Hesitation was death. Her phone buzzed again. Another message: "They know you're here, they're coming." The words sent a shiver down her spine. The threat had escalated beyond digital sabotage. Someone inside the building was moving to intercept her. The very people she had been warned to be cautious of were no longer passive. The danger was immediate. Samantha's training kicked in. She took a deep breath, scanning the room, memorizing exits, observing patterns of movement outside the windows, and noting security rotations. She had to be ready, not just for a digital confrontation, but for a physical one. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, activating layered containment protocols, isolating compromised nodes, and encrypting sensitive data. Each command was executed with meticulous care, her mind racing to anticipate the intruder's next move. Then the door opened. Samantha froze. A figure stepped inside, a high-level aide she had trusted, someone whose loyalty she had believed in. The person smiled, a cold, calculated expression. "I think you've done enough, Ms. Ellis," they said softly, closing the door behind them. Her heart slammed in her chest. Betrayal. The realization hit her with force. She had been observed all along, not just digitally but physically. Someone inside had known her every move. Samantha's mind raced. She had to act quickly. She initiated a final protocol, one she had designed as a last resort failsafe. It would lock down all critical systems and create a digital breadcrumb trail leading back to the intruders. It was her only chance to gain the upper hand. The aide moved closer, a subtle smirk playing across their face. "You're out of your depth, Ms. Ellis. You don't realize who you're dealing with." Samantha swallowed, forcing herself to remain calm. She had anticipated this. Every move she made had been calculated with the possibility of confrontation in mind. "Maybe," she said evenly, "but I know the system better than anyone, and I know that evidence cannot be erased so easily." The aide's expression faltered slightly. Samantha seized the opportunity, pressing the final command on her keyboard. Alarms sounded softly, not loud enough to alert the entire building, but enough to indicate a successful breach trace. She had turned the tables. The aide's eyes widened. They understood immediately that Samantha had anticipated the betrayal and had prepared a countermeasure. The digital battlefield had shifted, and Samantha now had the advantage. Her heart pounded, adrenaline surging, but her mind remained razor-sharp. She knew the intruder would not give up easily. This was only the first move in a dangerous, escalating game, and she had no choice but to stay one step ahead, to anticipate every action, to act decisively. The folder in her hands felt heavier than ever, a reminder of the responsibility she bore. Outside, the city remained oblivious, but within these walls a silent war had begun. The threat was no longer abstract. It was personal, immediate, and deadly. Samantha realized, with a clarity that sent a chill through her, that this was what she had been preparing for all along. Every late night analyzing data, every painstaking cross-reference, every calculated risk, it had all led to this moment. The aide took a cautious step back, eyes darting nervously toward the monitors. Samantha's fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to act again at the first sign of movement. The balance of power had shifted, but the danger was far from over. And in that charged, tense moment, Samantha understood the truth. The game had only just begun. The intruders were inside the building, aware of her presence and capable of anything. Her next moves would determine not just the success of containment, but the survival of everyone involved, and possibly her own life. As she pressed the final key and watched the system respond, a single thought burned through her mind. She had uncovered the threat, revealed it to the president, and now she would have to confront it head-on. The storm had arrived. Samantha Ellis's breath came in measured bursts, her eyes locked on the monitors that now glowed with the chaos of the breach. Red alerts pulsed with an urgency that mirrored the pounding of her heart. The betrayal had become tangible. Someone she had trusted, someone with access to sensitive information, had moved against her. And yet, she had survived the first wave of confrontation. For now. The aide, who had revealed themselves as a potential threat, remained in the room, cautious but clearly calculating. Every movement was deliberate, every gesture measured. Samantha's instincts screamed danger. She had always trained for precision, for anticipating the moves of adversaries, but this, someone inside the White House itself acting against her, was unlike anything she had faced before. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, ready to respond at a moment's notice. The containment protocols were active, but the intruder was clever, trying to regain control, probing for weaknesses in her defense. Samantha's mind raced, considering every possibility. If the aide succeeded in accessing the system, all the evidence she had collected, all the work she had done, could vanish in an instant. Worse, the perpetrators would know she had been uncovered, escalating their actions to eliminate her completely. "You shouldn't have come here alone," the aide said, voice low, almost casual but with an undercurrent of menace. "You don't understand the forces you're dealing with." Samantha didn't flinch. She had anticipated confrontation, and this was exactly the moment she had prepared for. "I understand perfectly," she said evenly. "You're trying to protect something, but your methods are compromised. You're risking lives, operations, and the security of this nation." The aide's expression hardened, a flicker of anger passing across their face. "You think you can stop me with a few keystrokes," they said. "You have no idea who you're up against." Samantha's pulse quickened, but her focus remained unshakable. She knew that words alone would not deter the intruder. Action was required, decisive, calculated, and immediate. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, executing a series of commands that would lock critical systems, trace access points, and create a digital signature pointing directly back to the intruder. Every action was a gamble, every keystroke a potential life-or-death decision. The aide lunged toward the console, trying to override her controls. Samantha reacted instantly, her hands a blur, countering their attempts with precision. Alarms flared softly, indicating success, but the threat was far from neutralized. The room itself seemed charged, every movement crackling with tension, every second stretched into an eternity. "You're making a mistake," the aide hissed, circling her like a predator, eyes sharp and calculating. "Step aside and I might let you walk out of here alive." Samantha's mind raced. She knew that hesitation could be fatal. The intruder was skilled, dangerous, and desperate. Every decision had to be decisive. She couldn't afford to retreat. The containment protocols had to succeed, or the entire network and the lives tied to it would be compromised. "I can't do that," she said firmly, voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. "Not when so much is at stake. You will not succeed." The aide's eyes flickered with recognition, realizing that Samantha was no ordinary analyst. She was prepared, skilled, and not afraid to act. They lunged again, attempting to cut her off physically from the console. Samantha sidestepped with agility, her training in high-pressure situations kicking in. She maneuvered around the room, simultaneously keeping control of the keyboard and evading the intruder. The digital battle raged silently, red alerts flashing, nodes locking down, transmissions being traced and isolated. Samantha could feel the pressure mounting with every passing second. The intruder's desperation was growing, and with it, the risk of escalation. Her eyes flicked to the monitors, analyzing patterns, predicting the intruder's next moves. She realized that if she could manipulate the system to simulate a false breach, she might lure the intruder into revealing their identity fully, giving her the leverage she needed. She executed the maneuver, carefully crafting a scenario in the system that suggested a critical node had been compromised. The intruder's reaction was immediate. They dove for the control panel, trying to regain access. Samantha held her ground, ready to act physically if necessary, and watched as they fell into the trap. In that split second, she seized the opportunity. Using a combination of digital commands and physical agility, she secured the compromised node and created a firewall around the intruder's access points. The monitors flashed green, indicating containment. The intruder froze, realizing that their actions had been anticipated. "You've underestimated me," Samantha said, voice calm but laced with authority. "And now you're trapped. There's nowhere to go, no way to escape." The aide's expression twisted in fury and disbelief. You can't do this alone." "I am alone," Samantha admitted, "but I am prepared, and I have the evidence. Every move you've made has been tracked, recorded, and secured. The moment you try to act again, the consequences will follow." The room fell into tense silence. Outside, the world carried on unaware. Inside, the confrontation had reached its peak. Samantha's hands hovered over the console, ready to finalize the containment and neutralize the threat completely. The intruder made a last desperate attempt to override the system, but Samantha was faster. With precise commands, she locked down the final nodes, cutting off all unauthorized access and securing operational data. The monitors now glowed steadily, green indicators confirming success. The intruder's power had been neutralized. Breathing heavily, Samantha stepped back from the console. She had survived the confrontation, outmaneuvered a dangerous insider, and secured the network. But she knew the battle wasn't over. The intruder was still in the room, aware of her capabilities, and the psychological tension hung thick in the air. "You've won for now," the intruder said, voice low and filled with grudging respect. "But this isn't over, you'll see. Others will come, and next time you might not be so lucky." Samantha met their gaze steadily. "I'm ready," she said firmly. "And if anyone else attempts to compromise this network, they will meet the same fate. I will not hesitate." The intruder's eyes narrowed, and without another word, they turned and left the room, disappearing into the shadows of the building. Samantha allowed herself a brief moment of relief, knowing that the immediate danger had passed, but understanding that the larger threat was still out there, waiting. Her phone buzzed once more. Another anonymous message. "Good, you survived the first wave, but be careful, others are coming." Samantha felt the weight of responsibility settle even deeper on her shoulders. She had confronted the first threat, neutralized it, and protected the network. But the battle was far from over. The stakes had escalated beyond anything she had imagined, and the enemies she faced were cunning, dangerous, and relentless. She glanced at the monitors, reviewing the secure nodes, tracing the intruder's digital footprint, and confirming that the system was fully contained. The evidence was intact, the network secure, and the immediate danger neutralized. But Samantha knew that vigilance was the only guarantee of continued safety. The room, once tense and suffocating, now felt charged with a different energy, one of cautious triumph, tempered by the knowledge that the real challenge lay ahead. She had survived the confrontation, but she had also proven something vital. She was capable, decisive, and prepared to face the dangers that lurked in the shadows. Her eyes flicked to the door, knowing that every step she took from here on out would carry the weight of responsibility, the awareness of danger, and the necessity for precision. The confrontation had tested her skill, courage, and judgment, and she had emerged victorious, but the storm was far from over. Samantha knew, with a chilling certainty, that the next phase would be even more dangerous. The network was secure for now, but the perpetrators would regroup, and the threat was far from eliminated. And as she prepared for what lay ahead, one truth was undeniable. She had faced the first wave of danger and survived, but the ultimate confrontation, the one that would decide everything, was still to come. Samantha Ellis stepped out of the briefing room, the tension of the past hours clinging to her like a second skin. Her palms were still clammy, her pulse racing, yet she carried herself with the same precision and calm that had guided her through the confrontation. The immediate threat, the insider who had tried to compromise the network, was neutralized, the system secure, and critical intelligence safeguarded. Yet, as she moved through the corridors of the White House, she knew the storm wasn't over. Every shadow seemed heavier now, every whisper of movement amplified in her mind. She had faced a dangerous adversary, but she had also made an enemy in the halls of power, someone who understood her capabilities and would not forget them. And while the breach had been contained, the ramifications of her actions were only beginning to ripple outward. Her phone buzzed, another anonymous message. "Well done. You've survived the first wave, but the game isn't over. Stay vigilant." Samantha exhaled slowly, her mind replaying the confrontation, every rapid decision, every keystroke, every movement that had kept her alive. She realized, with a mixture of relief and lingering dread, that she had not only preserved critical intelligence but also proven something to herself, that courage, skill, and clarity under pressure could overcome even the most calculated threats. As she walked down the dimly lit hallway, she saw the president waiting outside his private office. His posture was relaxed, but the intensity in his eyes made her heart tighten. He had watched her succeed, had seen her neutralize the insider threat, and now he was evaluating her in a way that no briefing or report could capture. "Ms. Ellis," he said, his voice calm but firm, "you've done exceptionally well. You acted decisively, protected critical operations, and maintained composure under extreme pressure. Not many would have survived what you just faced." Samantha nodded, a modest smile touching her lips, though the adrenaline still coursed through her veins. "Thank you, sir. I just followed the protocols, adapted where necessary." The president's gaze didn't waver. Adaptation is key, but what you did goes beyond protocol. You made decisions that saved lives and preserved national security, and you did it without hesitation. Samantha's thoughts drifted briefly to the aide she had neutralized. Their betrayal had been personal, a test of her judgment and ability to act under pressure. She knew the person would regroup, find allies, and attempt something again. The danger wasn't eliminated entirely, but it had been delayed, mitigated, and contained. The president gestured toward the secured monitors displaying the network status. All systems are now fully contained. Your work has prevented a major compromise. The intelligence community owes you a debt, and so does this administration. Samantha felt a flush of pride, tempered by exhaustion. The hours of tension, rapid decision-making, and confrontation had left her both physically drained and mentally hyper-aware. Yet beneath the fatigue, a sense of accomplishment settled in her chest. She had faced a threat no one else could have managed, and she had prevailed. "Sir," she began cautiously, "what happens now? The breach is contained, but the people behind it, they won't stop, and others could emerge." The president nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "You're right. Containment is one step. Identification and accountability are next. Intelligence teams will be working around the clock to trace every movement, every anomaly, and every person connected to this. But you've set the stage. Your actions gave us the advantage." Samantha felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. The immediate danger was over, but the larger game, the one involving power, deception, and hidden agendas, was far from concluded. She realized that surviving the crisis wasn't enough. Vigilance, foresight, and courage would be required for the long term. "Ms. Ellis," the president continued, "you've earned the right to be briefed directly on high-level operations moving forward. Your judgment has proven invaluable, and there's another reason I wanted to speak with you personally." Samantha's curiosity sharpened. She had expected recognition, perhaps commendation, but the weight in his tone suggested something more significant. "You were told to wait outside," he said, eyes locking on hers, "because not everyone in this building can be trusted, but I requested you personally. Why? Because I needed someone capable, decisive, and incorruptible to handle this situation, and you delivered." Samantha felt a rush of emotion, validation, pride, and a flicker of disbelief. She had been recognized not just for her technical skill, but for her integrity, courage, and ability to act under pressure. In a world where power and politics often overshadowed merit, this acknowledgement carried profound significance. "Your actions," the president continued, "have saved countless lives and protected critical operations. But more importantly, you've proven that one person, armed with skill and determination, can change the outcome even against seemingly insurmountable odds." Samantha swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. She had acted decisively, often with incomplete information and under extreme pressure. Every choice she had made carried risk, and yet she had succeeded. Recognition from the president, the highest authority in the nation, was both a relief and a responsibility she could not take lightly. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the emotional undercurrent. "I just did what needed to be done." The president gave a small nod, a gesture of acknowledgement that spoke volumes. "And that is why you were summoned. You were trusted with this responsibility because you could handle it, and you have." Samantha felt a shift within herself, a deep, resonant sense of purpose. The confrontation, the betrayal, the containment, and the peril had tested every facet of her skill and courage, and she had emerged stronger, more aware, and more capable than ever. Yet even in this moment of triumph, she remained vigilant. She knew the network could still face threats, the intruder could regroup, and unseen dangers could emerge at any time. The stakes were permanent, and the responsibilities she bore were enduring. But she had faced the impossible and prevailed, and that knowledge gave her strength. As she left the president's office, Samantha glanced once more at the monitors, at the secure nodes, and at the evidence she had protected. A sense of calm determination settled over her. The immediate crisis was over, but the lessons, vigilance, and courage she had demonstrated would guide her in the days to come. Outside, the world went on as usual. Tourists walked past the White House, unaware of the silent war that had unfolded within its walls. Cars honked in the distance, and the city thrummed with life. But within those walls, a decisive battle had been won, and a young analyst had proven herself capable of facing the unimaginable. Samantha's phone buzzed one final time. Another message, simple and direct. Mission accomplished. Stay alert. The world is watching. She smiled faintly, a mix of exhaustion and pride washing over her. She had survived the breach, neutralized a direct threat, and safeguarded intelligence of national importance. But more than that, she had earned trust at the highest level, proven her courage under pressure, and demonstrated the power of decisive action in the face of overwhelming odds. The storm had passed for now, but Samantha knew that vigilance, skill, and courage would always be required in the shadows of power. And as she walked through the corridors of the White House, her head held high, she realized one undeniable truth. She had faced the impossible and she had prevailed. The nation was safe for today. But Samantha Ellis knew, with unwavering certainty, that the next challenge was only a heartbeat away. And in that truth she found not fear, but resolve.